Hello, what's going on everyone? And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Lambda functions. And if you don't know what that means, they are an important part of functional programming that are often used for small or something like a throwaway function that are not actually a kind of a reuse in a program. Okay, so they are most of the time, we can actually call this something like a small anonymous function that is actually defined without something like a name. Okay, so you define these without even having a name on them. So it is often used for simple operations that you may need to do only once or even on the fly within your programming. And I don't know whether you guys kind of understand that, but that is just what the definition is. Now I want to throw in something like a syntax for that right here, and the syntax is actually very simple. So if you want to define something like a lambda function, you can just do lambda, and right here you're going to just bring in your argument. So this is going to be argument, and you can throw in your, and then you can go ahead and then bring in your expression. So this is going to be your expression right here. Okay, so this is just basically the syntax to that of the lambda programming. So right here, if I am to explain this, you are going to notice that this is lambda right here, and this is actually a keyword that is actually used to define the function. Okay, unlike we use something like a def right here. So if it is for traditional function, you can use something like def right here. But with lambda, you just use something like lambda like that to be able to define this particular function. Okay, and then for this one, that where we have an argument right here, this is basically, this is an input to the lambda function. So it can be one or more, whatever input that you want to input right there, you can actually put it in this particular place. And then the next one right here, which is actually expression, this is the operation or a return value which is actually executed and then returned by the lambda function, which is right here. Okay, so understand that just the operation or a return value. All right, so we have that right now. I want to comment out this, and to do that, I'll just basically want to cut this, and then let me just put that right here. All right, but maybe at the top right here we can do something like a syntax, and I'm doing that so that in case if you want to take a look at this later, it won't be something that is hard for you to actually understand. Okay, so the one above is actually the definition, like that, and we have the syntax here, we have the definition up there, and then down here we can actually write some real code down here if we want to. But then, so before we write any line of code, I want to explain a few things more. Just like unlike our regular functions where we actually use def, so right here we are using something like lambda to define the function, right, and which can actually have only expression, and then the result is actually returned automatically, and you don't actually need to use something like a return statement to be able to define a function or make use of a function. And let's go through an example down here, and what I'm going to do right now is down here I'm going to just create a function. Let me create a variable first of all, which I'm going to just basically call add2, and we can go ahead and set that to be equal to, so to define a lambda function you can do lambda, and then we'll go ahead and enter the argument right here. And in my own case, what I'm going to just do right now, I'm going to just enter x right here, and we're going to go ahead and then pass in x plus 2 right here. And so that is just that right there. And let me just put a comment so that you can actually understand what I'm trying to do right here. So this could be just called a lambda function that adds to a number, like that, and that's just what this is actually doing. And if we want us to like experiment with that, we can do a print down here, and what we basically want to print right now is actually going to be, we're going to just print out this variable that we actually call the add2 right here. And if we have that, and basically what you want to add this particular 2 to is going to be a value right here. So I'm going to just basically enter something like 5 right here, and that means that we're just basically adding the value of a 2 to this particular value right here, which is actually called a 5. Okay, so we can save the changes right here, and I want to run this code now to see what it's actually going to give us. So let's run lambda, and that should just basically be 7 right here. Okay, so you see that we actually got 7 down there, and that is actually correct, because if you add 2 to that of 5 right here, the value or the result is actually going to be that of the what is it called, it's just basically going to be 7. Okay, and if I want to add some text into this, you can also do that. So if I put some quotes in here and just say something like a result, and we can introduce a command here to save the changes. If you run this again, you should have something like result, and then we'll set that to the value of a 7 right there. Okay, so let me explain this a little bit. So on this particular line right here, we've actually set a variable right here, which is actually called a 2. Then after that, we define our lambda function right here, and with this, it means that this kind of defines a lambda function, and it actually takes an argument, and the argument right here is actually this particular x right here, and then it returns the value that it returns is actually x plus 2. So that's just basically what that means. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is I basically want to cut this and then put it into this comment right here. All right, then down here, what I basically want us to take a look at right now is actually the use cases of so let's call the use cases of lambda functions right there. So the first one, I'm going to just do number 1 right here. So these are the use cases of lambda function. Number 1, lambda functions are used in scenarios where you need a simple function for a shorter period. Okay, so this should actually be period. And for number 2, they are commonly used with functions like map right here, and are also used commonly with something like a filter function and even sorted function. Okay, so those are the common use cases of the lambda function. So let me cut this and then put it within this comment that we have up here. Okay, so those are the use cases of a lambda function. Now, what I want us to do is really going to be very simple. I will just basically want us to take a look at some examples where we are able to make use of all these functions that we have in here. So let's start with map right here. So I'm going to copy this. Then out here, let me put this as a comment, and maybe something like, let's say with, that means with map. So an example is what I'm actually going to spell out down here right now. So right here, remember that I want us to like give an example of where we are able to use the lambda function with that of the map right here. Okay, but before we do that, here is basically the explanation given to map function. Okay, so it applies a function to all items in an iterable, like something like a list. Okay, so it can actually apply a function to that, and I want to see an example down here. So to do that, what I want to do first of all is to first create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable of numbers. So this is going to be numbers, and we can go ahead and create a list right here. To create a list, we can throw in our what is it called, our square brackets, and I'm going to name some list right here, and we do have that right here. So we do have this particular list right here, but for us to be able to apply this particular function called a map in combination with that, which is actually called a map, it's really very simple. So what I want to do right now is just let me basically like I'll create a something like a variable down here, which is actually going to be called something like squared, and with that, it means that I'm going to just basically square everything that we have in this particular list right here, and you're going to see how I'm actually going to use that with the help of that of the map. Okay, so to do that right here, so if we say this is actually a list, and within the list function in here, I want to go ahead and then be able to use the map function, which I'm going to just do map, and I basically want to apply that particular map to our lambda function. So we need to create a lambda function within this particular place, and to do that, you know how we do that. We are going to just do lambda, and that's going to be x right here, and we can throw in our our colon, and we can just say x right here, and we can do multiply by, and raise that to the power of 2. So multiply by, the way that you are seeing it right here, simply means raised to the power of a certain number. Okay, if you want that to be raised to the power of 3, you can type 3 here. If you want it to be raised to a power of 1, you can type 1 there, but I want to raise that to a power of 2 right there, and that is just what that is. So we can introduce a comma here, and then the next value that we need to put in here is actually going to be that of the this is going to be numbers. So I'm going to just bring in numbers right here, which is this particular variable right here. Okay, so you see how we are able to use the map function right here to be able to create a function, okay, lambda function within an iterable list. Okay, so this is just how it looks right now. So if we save the changes right now and then run this, you're going to notice that these particular values that we have in here, all of them are going to be actually squared. Okay, all right, so let's save the changes. I think I have that saved, and okay, I think we need to print this out. So down here we can just do print, and we can go ahead and then print out squared variable right here. So this is going to be squared, and save the changes, and then I want to right click on this right now, and let's run that. And down here you see that it works just the way we actually believe that it should actually work. Okay, so 1 raised to the power of 2 is actually going to be 1, because 1 multiplied by 1 is actually going to be 1 right here. And then the next one is actually going to be 2, so 2 raised to the power 2 multiplied by 2 is actually going to give you a 4 right here. And the same process for that of the 3, and this one is actually going to be 16, just like you're seeing it down here. Okay, see that is actually correct, and that's just basically what map can actually help us to do with this. All right, so what I want to do now, I want to cut this and then try to put that into this comment in here so that we can focus on the next thing. And what we want to do next is actually going to be, assuming we want to work with something like let's say the next one, I think if we go up, the next one is actually called a filter. Okay, right there is actually called a filter. So to work with filter right here, I want to put that on the outside. So let's paste this, and to work with filter method or function right here, this is going to be filter, and I want to get the definition of a filter in there. All right, so just like the name actually sounds, with filter, it filters the items from an iterable based on a condition, and this is actually going to be an example. So we are basically going to draw an example using a lambda function with filter right here. All right, so to do that, we want to create a variable right here, which is actually going to be, the first one is actually going to be numbers, and we want to set that to the following list. So the first one is actually 1, we have 2, we have 3, we do have 4 right here, so let's change this to 4, and we'll have 5, and finally we do have 6 in here. So that's just basically the list we have in there. Right now, what I want to do this, what I want to do with this is really very simple. I just basically want to find a way of filtering only the even numbers from this particular list that we have up here. Okay, so to do that, let me create a variable right here and just say something like even. Let's call that even underscore numbers. And to do that is really very simple. On this particular line, that's just the line that I'm basically going to be able to use the filter function. But before we do that, let's make sure that this is actually, we'll bring in our list function in here. And the first thing we're going to need is actually going to be that filter method or function in here, and we're going to need to be able to run our lambda function within this particular place. And to do that, to create our lambda, we'll do lambda, and we're going to just do x right here, colon, and then we'll do x, and we're going to throw in our percentage right here to be able to get the even number. So this is going to be percentage of 2 right there, and then we set that to be equal to something like 0, and then the next value that we're going to basically need is going to be this particular number right here, because we're basically going to be sorting the numbers that are actually found in the numbers. All right, so that's just what that is on that particular line. Now the next thing I want to do is really going to be very simple. We can just simply go ahead and then print out the even number right here. So to do that, we'll do print, and I want to go ahead and then print out this particular variable right here called the even numbers, and let's save the changes. And if I run this right here, and you see that we kind of got 2, which is an even number. We have 4 right here, and we also have 6. So take a look at the list that we have in here. So 2 is actually an even number, and 4 is an even number, and then 6 is actually an even number. So those are numbers that when you divide them by 2 right now, you wouldn't actually get any remainder. Okay, so that is just what this line is actually talking about. So if you divide whatever value that is by 2, the remainder is actually going to be 0, right? So if you divide 2 by 2, you have 0, and then if you divide 4 by 2, you actually have 0. The same thing applies to value 6 right here. Now the last function I want to deal with is actually the sorted, right? So I want to cut this and then put that into our commented out section right here, and then down here we want to work with I think this is going to be with sorted. All right, so this is the function we want to sort out. Let me get the definition and some other things in here. All right guys, so we can actually use something like a lambda function to actually sort a complex data structure. Okay, so we can use it as a key to set complex data structure. And for an example right now, I think I'm going to actually use something like tuples. All right, so let me do, I'm going to just do right here, let me just create a tuple. And to do that, this is going to be, I'm going to just say points, and we'll set that to the following tuples or tuples, whatever you want to call that, but I think I'm going to just keep calling that tuples. So I'm going to throw in my square bracket in here, and then I'm going to just like create some points in here. So this is going to be, I'll also create another point, and this is going to basically be the last one. But between these points that we have in here, this is just going to be coordinates. Okay, so longitude and latitude right there. So I'm going to, the first value or pair of latitude and longitude are going to be 2, 3 right here, and then the next one is actually going to be 4, 1 right here. And then the last one is actually going to be 1, 7 within this particular place. So we have that right now. Now what I want to do right now is to go ahead and see how is it that I can actually sort those while creating or while using something like a lambda function as a key to be able to sort that complex data structure. This is actually a complex data structure right now. Okay, so down here, I'm going to create a variable right here. Let's call this something like sort underscore something like points. Okay, since we're basically just trying to sort the points, and to do that right now, we're going to need the function called a sort or sorted, right? What's that actually called a sorted? I think it's actually called a sorted, right? And then within this sorted right here, the first value we're going to need is actually going to be the points. Let's make sure we type that correctly. It's going to be points, which is a variable that we have up there, right? So we have that in that particular place. So the next thing we need is actually going to be to create the what is it called, the lambda function in here. And to do that, I'm going to use a key term called a key, and I'm going to just set that to be, this is actually going to be equal to, and I'm going to just do something like lambda right here, and this is going to be lambda x, and then we can actually go ahead and then say x right here, and then throw in our square bracket, and we can go ahead and say something like 1 right here. All right, so that's just how it is, and I will explain that as we move along anyway. So for instance, let's go ahead, if you save, before we save, I just basically want to print, let's go ahead and try to print out that variable object, which is actually called a sort underscore points, and let's try to see the result right here. So I'm going to right click on this and then hit on run, and you're going to see that that's a kind of a get sorted. So this is going to be, so this is it right here. So it has been sorted, and to explain this, what we did right here is that we wanted to be sure that the sorting actually goes by following the second value. So this is in position 0, this is in position 1, this is also in position 0, this is in position 1, this one is in position 0, and this is position 1. So if you watch the sorting right here, we want it to make use of the position 1 right here. So these ones that we have in here are the ones that we want it to like sort. Okay, so if you take a look at in here, you see that the value here is less than the value that is actually here, and also less than the value that is here. So that's why it brought in this particular one first of all. So if you take a look in here, see that 4 comma 1 is actually the first value. So after that, if you take a look at the next one, right here, this is 3, and then if you compare it with the next one, is that this is actually 7. So that's why it's a kind of a preferred making use of this particular one, which is 3, because 3 is actually greater than that of the 7 here as the next value. And then finally, 7 is actually greater than all of the values in second positions right here. That's why it is like this. All right, so if you want to sort it maybe by making use of the first values right here, which are in position 0, you can just go ahead and put 0 right here. So if I put 0 in here and we'll save the changes and then we'll run again, you see that the position is a kind of a changes. You see that 1 is actually less than 2 and 2 is less than 4 right here. Okay, so 4 is actually greater than 2 and 1. So you see the sorting? Very simple, right? Yeah. All right, so let me cut this just like we used to do. I want to put that up there. All right, so the next scenario I want to actually take a look at right now is making use of a lambda function as an inline function. Okay, so down here, if I just do as inline function, and I want to like give an example for that down there, and the reason that I want us to like treat this is just because lambda function are actually handy functions for quick operation that don't actually need a full function definition to be able to do that. Okay, so I think I want to put that in here so that you guys can have that also with yourself, that particular definition right now. So lambda functions are handy for quick operations that don't need a full function definition. Okay, so if you need to make a quick calculation that you don't have to create a full function, you can actually use a lambda right there. Okay, so that's just what that line is actually kind of trying to tell us. And I want to give an example right here. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to just create a variable and just call that something like results, and we can go ahead and set that to be equal to, so this is going to be lambda. I'm going to just do lambda right here. So let's make sure that's actually in lowercase letter. So this is going to be lambda right here, and we're going to have x multiplied by y right here, and that's just basically going to need two values, right? So the next thing I want to do is, if we get out of this particular place right here, we can go ahead and then throw in another parenthesis, and we can go ahead and just do something like a 5 comma 3 right here. Okay, basically what this is actually going to do for us is really very simple. So we do have values of x and y right here, right? And what this means is that we do have the value of 5 to be assigned to x, and then the value of y to actually be assigned to that of the 3 right here. And if we try to, okay, I think we have a little error right here. So we need to have this particular one, y right here does not actually have a reference. And to correct that, we need to introduce a comma here and just do y from here. Okay, So with that, I think we should be able to have a reference right here. So look at it, it has been corrected. So if we save the changes right here, what this is simply means is we're going to just multiply the value of x by that of the value of y right here. So if we save the changes and then click on run, we're going to see we should have something like, I think there is an error right there. Okay, we need to print that out. So down here, if we do print, and we just basically want to print the result variable, right? So let's do result variable in here, and then I'll run the code again after we save the changes, and then we see that we'll have 15 right here, which is actually correct. Okay, so because if you multiply 5 by that of the 3 right here, is actually going to give you 15, and that's just basically what that is for us right here, and it's very simple. So in this case, the lambda function actually multiply just two values, that's 5 and 3. And then in summary, lambda function are anonymous small functions in Python, which are actually used for simple operations. They are useful when you need short, temporary functions, particularly in conjunction with something like map, filter, and even something like sorted, which those things are actually functions. They most of the time use them handle with that of the lambda functions. And I hope that you guys are kind of find something useful from this video. And thanks for watching. I think I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye for now.